Hi, everyone. Welcome, 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 welcome. Love and lights, Ashe. Welcome all to the Black Light series. I don't know why it has the meditation on there. I need to be fixing this up, but that's tomorrow. But welcome all, everyone, today. I sincerely appreciate folks who are coming in for the first time. Watching this, I have it on both mobile and on the landscape, portrait landscape, so people on their phones can see it too. Um, Again, this is the Black Light series, and I don't know if you were here last time, last week, last Tuesday, but I was expressing all this excitement around being here and doing this series because it is so profoundly aligned and is my spirituality and spiritual walk. Okay, so welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we're talking about releasing the lie, how we were taught to betray ourselves. And I just really want to send out appreciation for you, as well as wishing everyone a blessed and prosperous and abundant day full with peace, 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 and connectivity, um, and love, respect, and all of that. So thank you so much for being here. All right. So, I have notes because I really enjoy speaking clearly from my notes since I'm in this remote capacity. Stay on track, get out what I really want to say without getting sidetracked. Because, as you all know, whoever has been coming back, I can get sidetracked. However, before we get into the content today, the subscriptions are very important. I ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps the algorithms. People, if you like this presentation, and even if you don't, if it just motivates you to want to look at some more of the resources I have. As a matter of fact, we have a new name, Power Profit TV. I'm going to upload a video so that folks know exactly what that means with the transition. But you got to hit the subscribe. All right. This is a commitment to me and this work. Hit the subscribe so people can find this content. Those who are seeking to understand if they are living someone else's story, someone else's script, or if they realize something's up and they need to release some of the residue that builds up within us regarding what the society pours into us, right? So hit notifications, okay, so that you're aware of when videos drop, because there'll be plenty more as Power Profit TV. I have 3 different things I'm going to be adding to this channel, and hit like. So please subscribe, hit notifications, and like if indeed you do. And if you're here today watching this, I would ask you to write in the comments, release the lie in the comments. Let me know you were here. Type it out, release the lie. Okay. Thank you so much. And on that note, I've done enough profligating. Prognosticating. Let's get into the content today, okay? Because last week, I told you what you are. I told you who you are in regards to being a cosmic receiver, okay? A keeper of ancestral memory, right? An amplifier of intuition, a 360-degree intelligent being whose very skin is a technology of divine design. And I want to keep this inclusive. We all have neuromelanin. It's a technology of design, of divine design. And I meant every word that I said last week. So today I need to tell you what has been layered over that truth, the truth of you. What you were handed that was not yours. What you've been carrying in your body, in your work, in your spirit, that was placed there deliberately by systems that could not afford for you to know what you truly are. And today we name that lie. And I'm not coming to you with theory. I'm coming with you with my published research, and I'm coming to you with my own life. Because I was living a lie for years inside institutions that I now understand operated like nothing more than a modern plantation. And I did not see it. Not because I was not intelligent, because as you know, Minister Dr. Akila Ka Ma'at is intelligent, if nothing else, right? And not because I was not spiritually awake. Maybe the eyes were kind of a little bit open, right? But because the lie was so embedded in my identity that I had mistaken it for myself. This episode is called Releasing the Lie, How We Were Taught to Betray Ourselves. And a subtitle under that is Releasing the Lie from Force to Force. Okay? And by the time we are done today, my friends, you are going to understand exactly what that means in your professional life, in your personal life, and in your spirit. So let's go. I want to begin with a question that my research forced me to sit with for a very long time. How does a system that was designed to break you end up living inside of you? Not around you, not against you, inside you. In the way you respond when you are exhausted and someone asks you for more. In the way you say yes when every cell in your body is screaming no. In the way you mask what you feel so everyone in the room stays comfortable. So the institution stays satisfied. So the people around you do not have to confront what your distress reveals about them. How does that happen? The answer, according to the clinical literature and to my own published research, is through what scholars call the strong Black woman schema. The strong Black woman schema is not compliant. It is a cage built from slavery, decorated to look like strength. And let me give you the clinical definition, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what it means. The strong Black woman schema, sometimes called the Superwoman schema in the research literature, is a set of deeply embedded psychological obligations that Black women have collectively internalized as a result of the specific history of shadow slavery, racial trauma, and systemic devaluation in the United States, would I say, being treated like garbage. My research and the broader literature identify 5 elements of this schema, these obligations. And I I want you to listen to each one not as an abstraction, but as something you may recognize in yourself, my friends. The first one is the perceived obligation of strength, the expectation to consistently project an image of unyielding resilience, regardless of what is truly happening inside. The obligation to suppress emotions, that is the habit of masking trauma, distress, or exhaustion to maintain a composed facade, to keep the face still when the inside is in pieces. The obligation to resist vulnerability, viewing asking for help as a personal weakness. We all know that. I can do it myself. I don't need nobody. Ooh. Avoiding reliance on others at almost any cost. Because dependence on others was never safe. Self-sacrificing caregiving is another obligation. Prioritizing the physical and emotional needs of others, families, colleagues, institutions, above your own well-being, to the point of self-erasure. And the obligation of the motivation to succeed. You may say, that's not an obligation. We want to succeed. This is a fierce drive to overcome socioeconomic and other limitations despite scarce resources, but not driven by vision, by fear, but by the belief that stopping means failure and falling means proving them right. I need you to understand something, my friends, about where this comes from. This schema did not begin as a choice. It began as survival. During chattel slavery, Black women had no protection from the violence of the institution. Not physical protection, not emotional protection, and certainly not spiritual protection. The only thing available was endurance. The mask that said, you cannot break what cannot be seen breaking. That mask saved lives. That endurance preserved families. And I want to honor that. I want to honor those women. But here is what no one told us when slavery ended, my friends, when the legal structure changed. The psychological structure did not automatically flow. The mask stayed on. The suppression stayed in the body. The obligation to strength became a collective identity, passed from mother to daughter, generation to generation, without anyone naming what it was or where it came from, except this. That's who I am. That's me. My published research documents what the schema does to Black women's bodies. In my 2025 study published in the Journal of Racial and Ethnic Health Disparities, my co-authors and I found that this strong Black woman schema functions as a racist stressor with measurable associations to perceived stress, anxiety, depression during pregnancy. And although we have yet to show the connection with the outcomes to adverse birth outcomes, this internal distress sets the scene in this article for what could lead to low birth weight babies, preterm babies, as well as maternal or perinatal morbidity and mortality in the mother. With measurable associations, we found measurable associations to perceived stress during pregnancy among Black women. And that is under Warren, Natarajan, and Roess. The article's entitled Superwoman Schema, not as a racist as a racist stressor and its association to perceived stress during pregnancy and birth outcomes among Black women. And yes, we did show a connection between perceived stress and birth outcomes. And that's in, as I said, the Journal of Racial and Ethnic Health Disparities. Okay. You can find this information in the document in my link in bio. I'm going to put up my CV so you can see these articles. So this is not a metaphor, my friends. This is peer-reviewed evidence supported by massive amount of other peer-reviewed evidence that the internal residue of racism, the strong Black woman schema, produces measurable psychological harm. It shows up in cortisol levels. It shows up in blood pressure. It shows up in the health of children yet to be born. And it definitely shows up in our mental health. Hopelessness, low self-worth, anxiety, depression, and the strong Black woman schema was even associated with suicidal ideations in an article published by Jeffries, I think in the mid-2020s. So this lie is not harmless. The lie is lethal. And for me, the lie was not something I only studied. It was something, my friends, I was actually living. So I spent years inside of what the Academy calls Research One institutions, research universities, land grant institutions, the kind of places that carry long histories and long names and longer legacies of exactly who they were built to serve and who they were built to extract from. I would also say that many land grant universities were cultivated from actual plantations. And if you look at how they're created with the big house and then the rest of the buildings and then the dorms, you could map the geography to the geography of the plantations of old. And on a plantation, the labor of Black people built and sustained an institution that, well, they participated, my friends, that did not belong to them. The products of their labor, the cotton, the tobacco, the wealth, were owned by the institutions and its beneficiaries. The people doing the labor were expected to be productive, compliant, grateful for the position, and silent about the conditions, the institutional racism. Now, tell me how that is fundamentally different from what large research universities have historically demanded of Black faculty. I was expected to produce, to serve on every diversity committee, to be the representative face of equity and DEI. Yes, I'm going to do a DEI live stream. In every room, to mentor Black students, every Black student who needed support because there was no one else. And also I felt an obligation to, because I didn't want them to face what I faced. And the institution was not going to hire anybody else like me. And the work was not going to count. It never counts toward tenure. I was expected to absorb egregious racism. Forget microaggressions, because as I have talked about on other live streams, microaggressions, the term is bullshit. Any racism is egregious and traumatizing. There is no small racism. Racism is racism, my friends. And so I absorbed egregious racism from colleagues, from administrators, from students, from the structures themselves. And I was expected to do it quietly, with composure. Yeah, they saw. With the professionalism that the strong Black woman's schema had trained me to perform. Yo, this is some real stuff right here. The institution didn't see me as a scholar. It saw a function. It saw a check the box. And the strong Black woman's schema made me available to be a function, a check the box. Every element of the schema, my friends, was operational in that environment. The obligation to project strength, because showing exhaustion will confirm their narrative that I did not belong. Thus, I was working basically 90 or more hours a week. The suppression of emotions, because any display of distress became evidence of my unsuitability rather than evidence of their harm. The resistance to vulnerability by asking for help meant exposing a flank. The self-sacrificing caretaking, because if I did not carry students and white people's fragility, the students will be left in nothing, and the white folks, they indeed would be in distress, and that would mean a problem for my job. The drive to succeed, because every credential, every publication, excuse me, every publication, every committee appointment was a defense against the question they were always asking: is she really qualified to be here? I was qualified. I was more than qualified. But the schema had me spending my qualifications defending my right to exist in the room rather than using it to do the work I was called to do. That's burn the candle at both ends. And when we talk about how we were taught to betray ourselves, that is what it looks like. I was being forced professionally. That is what it cost. When the professional took from me, what the professional took from me was time, energy, and voice. What it did to me personally was much more serious. The strong Black woman schema does not stay at work. You carry it home in your body. You carry it into your relationships. You carry it into spaces where you are supposed to be able to put the mask down. And you discover that the mask has been so long that you have forgotten how to take it off. And I have to say that because the schema is so natural within Black communities, the strong Black schema is communicated back to you as to who you are from people who look like you, because they believe the lie. They were betrayed by the lie. And hence they betray the Black women in their lives because of the lie. You know, I found in my own body the same symptoms I was finding among my research participants: the chronic stress response, the hypervigilance that does not turn off because the threat was never fully stopped, the physical manifestations of a nervous system that has been on high alert for so long, it no longer registers high alert as unusual. It just became a clenched fist that I couldn't even see was clenching. This is just how I think, I feel. This is just how it is. And that's from another published article by Natarajan and Warren, 2024, examining associations of the strong Black woman to maternal mental health and perinatal health, a literature synthesis. This is in the Journal of Gynecology and Maternal Health. I presented this research internationally at an international gynecological forum that was supposed to be clinical. This information they had never heard in this way. They were indeed impressed. And so the literature I was synthesizing on Black women's maternal health on the perinatal consequences of carrying the schema through pregnancy was describing what the body does when it has been forced, betrayed too long. And I was reading it from inside that exact experience. The resistance to vulnerability meant that I did not allow myself to be held when I needed holding. The self-sacrificing caretaking meant that the people in my personal life received the residue of what the institution had left. And what I called that love, I called that what the family does, but it was not love freely given. It was an obligation operating under a name it didn't deserve. The schema will have you pouring from an empty vessel and calling yourself generous. That is not generosity, my friends. That is a depletion wearing a crown. And here is what I want every Black woman in this live right now to hear. The fact that you are exhausted is not a character flaw. The fact that your body is carrying what it is carrying, it isn't a weakness. It's evidence of what you have survived. And it is also a signal, a clear signal, that the container you have been living inside is too small. It's too small, my friends, for who you truly, actually are. And that is a dimension that the clinical literature doesn't always reach. I would say hardly ever reach, because the clinical is divorced from the spiritual. But it may be the most important dimension. The strong Black woman schema suppresses the spiritual self. You have to understand that. Not accidentally, as a feature. Think about what the schema requires. To be strong is to be functional. To be functional is to produce. To produce is to have no time, no space, no margin for the interior life, or it leaves room for an interior life that we outsource to the church, the preacher, and the Bible. For the still small voice, for the knowing that arrives in silence and requires stillness to receive, the strong Black schema, woman's schema, does not provide that opening. The schema demands that you be available, and spiritual depth requires you to be unavailable, unavailable to the world's noise long enough to be able to hear what's true. I did not know in those years inside the ivory tower that I was a cosmic receiver. I did not have the framework yet. It was just becoming. But I was experiencing the consequences of a receiver that had been jammed up, flooded with the frequencies of institutional racism, of performance, of survival so thoroughly that the deeper signal was having a hard time coming through. My intuition was present. My ancestral connection was present. The 360-degree natural intelligence I was born with was present. But the schema erects walls, and these walls were around all of it in the name of protection. And behind those walls, a version of me was waiting to be found. The lie does not just take your peace, it takes you. And the work of release is not just healing. It is recovery of a self that never stopped existing. Professionally depleted, personally depleted, spiritually contained. That was the full cost of the lie with which I was betraying myself with. And then something shifted, my friend. Something shifted. The thing that the strong Black woman schema, the thing about it is that it's almost impossible to see while you're inside of it. Not because you're unaware, not because you are unsophisticated, because it is not positioned as a constraint. It is positioned as your identity, your strength. How many times do you hear, oh, you're strong, you're strong, you're strong. Are you a strong woman? You're strong, you're strong. Your strength, your defining quality, the thing that makes Black women who they are. And I have to give a little subtext to that, Black women, because there's so many of us that exist so uniquely. Many have been enlightened. Many understand that the strong Black woman is a coping strategy and utilize these things strategically. Some have just released it completely. Okay, so there's all types. I'm not essentializing. I would never, because I don't like it when it's done to me. So that strength is the thing that defines who you are. And when someone, even you, suggests that the thing you call your strength might actually be a wound, the schema itself mobilizes to reject that idea. What? I need a, who's that rapper? John something. What? It'll come to me. The schema itself, Little John. The schema itself, the psychic nature, the psychic capacity of that schema mobilizes to reject the idea. That's how strong it is. Because a strong Black woman does not have wounds, right? She has endurance. The moment of seeing for me, the moment of seeing for me was not dramatic, right? It did not arrive with trumpets. It arrived when I was deep in research, when I was reading study after study, documenting what the schema does to Black women's bodies, their mental health, their pregnancies, their children. And somewhere in that reading, I stopped being a researcher, my friends. And I actually became a subject. I looked up from all those data and I saw myself in years and decades in it. I saw my own obligation to strength, my own perceived obligation to strength. The face I kept still at every meeting where someone said something that should have broken something apart or maybe moved somebody to address how horrible it was. I saw my own suppression of emotion, the decades and years of masking that had become so automatic. Oh, I could no longer always tell what I was truly feeling underneath. I saw my own resistance to invulnerability, the way I had made myself an island. Not because I did not need people, but because I did not trust that needing people was safe. I'm sorry, I did not realize this was going to happen. I saw my own self-sacrificing caretaking, the way I had given to the institution, to my students, to everyone who needed something, until I had given away pieces of myself that I had not intended to put on that table. This is the first time I'm talking about this, my friends. And I saw my own drive to succeed, which I call ambition. I had called purpose. I had actually called my calling. But which, when I looked at it honestly, was also driven by fear, by the terror of confirming what the system had always been trying to prove about me, about us. I was not living my life. I was defending my right to have one. That recognition, that seeing broke something open. It opened something. Not in a way that destroyed me, my friends. In a way that freed me. Because once you see the schema operating in your life, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you cannot continue to operate from inside of it with the same unconscious compliance. The lie requires invisibility to maintain its power. The moment it is named, the moment it is seen, it begins to lose its hold. Yeah, I should have bought some tissues out here. Because seeing it was not enough. I needed to understand it. And that need launched a question that changed my life. The question was this: why? Why were Black people treated this way? Not historically, I knew the history, but at a deeper level, at the level of something that required this kind of sustained, organized, institutionally enforced effort to diminish. Why? What was it about us that required that level of suppression? Something that is truly inferior does not need to be suppressed. Did you hear me? Something that is truly inferior does not need to be suppressed. One more time. Something that is truly inferior does not need to be suppressed. You do not build an entire apparatus of law and science and culture and religion to keep down something that innately cannot rise. You only need that apparatus when what you're trying to suppress has real power. Did you hear me? You only need suppressive apparatus when what you're attempting to suppress has real power. The sophistication of the system designed to diminish you is the most honest testimony to how powerful you actually are. That question, why, led me to melanin intuitively. It was a download. It led me to Richard King's documentation of melanin and neuromelanin and the pineal gland. It led me to Kemetic tradition and Nubian cosmology. It led me to the study of what I now call intuitive melanin metaphysics. I am. I am. I am. I am to the second degree. And that study, which I am sharing in the Black Light series. Oh, excuse me. And in that study, I found what the schema had been suppressing. Not just strength, not just resilience. I'm trying to end it all quick. Not just strength, not just resilience, something far more significant than any of those. A technology, a design, a capacity for cosmic receiving, ancestral connection, intuitive amplification, and 360-degree intelligence that had been present in my body the entire time the schema was keeping me small. That discovery did not shift my thinking. It shifted my very being. And that shift had a name in the framework I'm building. Moving from the betrayal, from being forced to force power. In the power release framework, at the center of my book and this entire series, I make a distinction between two ways of moving in this world: forced and force. Forced is what the strong Black woman schema produces. It is a life lived in reaction, in performance, in compliance with a story about who you are that someone else wrote and that was absolutely needed at a place, time, and space in history. Forced is the closed fist, holding everything tightly because you have been taught that if you loosen your grip, everything you have managed to protect will be taken from you. Forced is living from the wound rather than from the center. It is exhausting because it requires constant management of the face, of the emotions, of the performance strength, constant modulation. It is unsustainable because it draws from the well that is never refilled. Because the refilling would require a vulnerability the schema forbids. Forced is also what I call lifting, just getting through, just making it to the end of the week, just surviving the meeting, the semester, the year, never pausing long enough to ask, is this truly the life I was designed to live? When you are forced, you are not living your life. You are managing it, my friends. Force is different in every dimension. Force is not power imposed on others. It is power, it is the power source from within. It is the open hand, not because you have stopped protecting yourself, but because you have discovered that the most powerful thing, you have discovered that the most powerful thing you possess cannot be threatened by staying open. It can only be accessed through openness. Force is what I call orchestrating, moving through your life with intentionality, with agency, with the understanding that you are not a passenger in your own story. You are the author, the conductor. And the author does not write from obligation. The author writes through vision, from vision, creative expression. The shift from forced to force is not a decision you make once. It is a practice, a daily choosing. And it begins with release. The power of release is not about releasing your standards on your boundaries or your ambition. It is about releasing the internalized lie that your worth must be earned through endurance, that your value is conditional on your productivity, that you must be strong in the way the Black woman schema defines strength, or you do not deserve to be here. Release is not giving up, my friends. Release is putting down what was never yours to carry in the first place. And here's where melanin enters the conversation, not as an add-on, but as the ground of everything here. When I discovered melanin and designed the intuitive melanin metaphysical framework, when I understood that my melanin is a cosmic receiver that it carries ancestral memory, that it amplifies intuition, that it integrates body and spirit and intellect into a coherent intelligence, that it is collective consciousness made real. I understood something I could not have articulated before. The strong Black woman schema was not just psychologically damaging, my friends, it was spiritually jamming the signal. Every element of the schema interferes with the four functions of melanin. The suppression of emotion interferes with the cosmic receiver because you cannot receive when you have shut down your own sensitivity. The resistance to vulnerability interferes with ancestral memory because the ancestors speak in the quiet places. The schema walls off. The obligation to strength interferes with the intuitive amplifier because intuition requires you to trust your own knowing, and the schema has trained you to defer to external authority. The exhaustion of self-sacrificing caretaking interferes with your 360 degree of natural intelligence and your innate collective consciousness because integrated intelligence and collective consciousness requires a self that is intact. No, not one that has been parceled out to every demand except its own. Releasing the schema is not just emotional healing, it is spiritual activation. It is clearing the interference so that the signal can get through. And that's what happened. Okay? Becoming force means becoming what you already are, fully unapologetically, with no part of yourself withheld. I left academia. One day I'll tell you how I left. Not because I was defeated, but because I was finished being forced. And when I stepped out of that institution, when I opened the fist and put down what was never mine to carry, what I found on the other side was not empty space. What I found was myself, the version of me that the schema had been containing, the receiver, the rememberer, the amplifier, the full spectrum intelligence and collective consciousness that my melanin had been broadcasting the entire time. I was too forced to tune in. That discovery has no reversal. You cannot unknow this. Once you have felt what it is to move from force rather than fear, nothing about the forced life is bearable anymore. And that can cause a severe upset in life as you try to figure out where your place is. And on that, I will offer, please hit subscribe, notifications, and like, because this is my walk now, and I'm not making hundreds of dollars a year. As a matter of fact, I'm on pittance, because once you have this discovery, you cannot unknow it, and you cannot go back. And that is exactly where I want you to be by the end of this series. I want to give you one practice for this week. Okay? I want you to identify one place in your life where you are living forced. Not every place, not all at once. Don't go nuts right here. Just one place, okay? One specific situation, professional, personal, or spiritual, where you recognize the schema is operating, where you see yourself performing strength you do not actually have, where you see yourself masking, suppressing, overgiving, enduring. I want you to ask yourself one question about that place. Whose story is this? Who told me that this was what strength looks like? Who decided I had to carry it this way? Because the lie was placed to betray you. It was planted to betray you. It did not grow from your own ground. It was created to portray you. And the moment you see it as planted, cultivated, you can begin to uproot that bad weed. You do not have to fix everything today, my friends. You only need to see it. That is, if you choose to. Seeing is where release begins. And if you're seeing this and you want to work on release, please visit powerprofit.com to meet with me one-on-one so we could set the work of release in motion. Okay, the open hand, let me just clarify. The open hand does not mean empty. It means ready. Ready to receive what was always meant for you, instead of holding what was never yours to carry. On Wednesday, tomorrow, we go deeper in our live guided meditation practice, the Black Light Meditation. We'll take what you identified today and work with it in the body, because that schema lives in the body. And release must happen there too. These are baby beginning steps to release. Thursday, I've moved the TikTok teaching to YouTube. So Thursday, teaching goes into the next layer of the intuitive melanin metaphysics framework, the ancestral memory function, and what it means when the ancestors are speaking and the schema has been blocking that signal. The Black Light Activation Guide in the link in bio has reflection questions for this episode. I encourage you to reflect with those questions. The questions will help you sit with what has come up today. If you do not have a copy, as I said, the link is in the description. It is a flip book that can be downloaded as a PDF. My book, The Power of Release, Journeying from a Closed Fist to an Open Hand. Everything we talked about today lives there in full, my friends. You were not born to be strong in the way the system defined it. You were born to be force, power. And the difference between those two things is your entire life. I'm Minister Dr. Akila Ka Ma'at. I released, I survived the releasing, and I'm thriving. So can you. I'll see you here tomorrow, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Don't forget to download your your Black Light Activation Guide, my friends. Thank you so much for sitting for today. You know I sincerely appreciate your time. And again, I'll say one more time, If you are sitting in this session or you're coming to it later, I encourage you to hit subscribe and like the video, hit notifications. The subscribe and like help me get into the algorithm of YouTube. And since this is my bread and butter, and I am believing the abundance will come, I need your help to get there. Thank you so much for your time today. I'll see you tomorrow. Be blessed and abundant. Signing off. Bye bye.